Good afternoon, good afternoon, and welcome to the opening event of the fourth day of the At the Fringe Tranås International Arts Festival. And this afternoon, you have the opportunity to listen to the third of our practitioners within the language arts talk about their particular passion for words. Eleanor is a storyteller. In the Wales storytelling community, she's quite an important person, and she organises regular spoken word events that include writers and storytellers. And for us at the residency, Eleanor is one of the international residents. That has been a wall that perhaps some of us didn't know existed. Certainly, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, but I have a great love of the spoken word and the performance element of the language arts. Um, but it's something that we found. Eleanor has come to storytelling from a theatre background. I think perhaps some storytellers come from writing background, and some storytellers, like Phelim, are naturally storytellers from the day they're born. But what that means, I think, what that history that Eleanor brings is a sense of collaboration. She can't work without collaboration from the theatre aspect. And that has been something that within the residency we've all benefited from greatly. And I think we've heard an awful lot from Eleanor. And Eleanor not only has this craft, but she uses this craft. She uses it, it's an applied discipline. So I won't rub it on any longer. I'll ask Eleanor to tell you about that herself.
Hello. Yes, my name is Eleanor, and I'm a storyteller, but I use storytelling mainly as a healing tool. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background of how I've got to where I am today, a little bit about my work, and share some stories with you, and then we'll have an opportunity for a bit of a chat afterwards. But mainly I am the artistic director of an organisation called People Speak Up. And I started this organisation a year ago after 3 years of running an event called Spoken Word Saturday. And I started Spoken Word Saturday as an opportunity for people to come together, but of all disciplines, so storytellers, writers and poets, to all come together and share some time in a space and connect. And I realised from that time together there was a real need for people and communities to connect or to reconnect. So I'd like to ask a question actually. Do we feel connected right now?
Oh, yes. Well,
I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise, and it's an exercise that I use when I meet new people or I work with new groups. I'd like you to face a person next to you or opposite you, make eye contact with them. So it could be the person next to you, person opposite you, and make eye contact with that person. And keep that eye contact with that person, keep that eye contact. And when you're ready, try and clap your hands at the same time together by keeping that eye contact. Thank you. It's a simple exercise, you would think, but reflect on how you felt when I asked you to make eye contact. Most of us aren't strangers in the room. We've spent, a few of us, many a drunken night so far. But it's through time. I'm not sure why it's happened, but human connectivity has started to disappear within communities. And that's an exercise that you can reflect on. So I'd like to start with a story. And this story is a kind of explanation of how and why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And I've had lots of questions in the past week asking, why do you do what you do? How did you get started? You know, what is storytelling? And I find it really hard to answer these questions. So I'm just going to tell you a story and maybe it will answer those questions for you. 2012. I sit in a therapist's office. The smell of defeat is all around, pain in my face. After many sessions of therapy, I took a sabbatical from my job. And I took a sabbatical from my husband. And I found myself in New Zealand, in a place far, far away. 3 months later, I find myself in Cambodia. Phnom Penh Airport. The air is filled with cigarette smoke, and there are little legs, little skinny brown legs with no hair, and at the end of the legs are flip-flops. And through the sea of little legs are a pair of white, hairy, chunky legs. And at the end of those legs are a pair of big, black, dirty boots. And as I look up, there is my husband, Mike. We embrace. And it was a smell that I'd longed for. I have many stories about my time in Cambodia, but one of the strong memories is a time when I visited Angkor Wat, the temples. Now, what I forgot to tell you is that Cambodia was a place that I'd always wanted to visit. It was a place that I thought I could help and save others, use my skills. Most of you are probably aware that Cambodia went through mass genocide. 2.5 million people killed between 1974 and 1979. So it's a strange place. And there are faces of pain all around. So I'm in Angkor Wat and I'm walking through the temples, and there, in the corner, squatting, is a little old lady. You don't see many old people in Cambodia. She had no hair, no teeth, and her eyes were glazed over. I'm going to have to put the mic down for this one. She took out my arms and she started doing this. Tears run down my face. A shiver ran up my spine. And a shift took place. The following day, we took a trip to Phnom Penh. I wanted to visit the Genocide Museum. Mike said, "No, Eleanor, you cannot unsee what you have seen." As we arrived at the Genocide Museum, it had been the torture prison during the Khmer Rouge time. Originally, it was a French colonial built school, a beautiful building. But when we arrived, there was floor upon floor, room upon room, picture upon picture of faces. I'll never forget those faces. You cannot unsee what you have seen. I spent the rest of my time in Cambodia, like most Westerners do, drinking too much beer and eating too much food. I volunteered. I worked with deaf dancers. I worked in a circus theatre school. But you cannot unsee what you have seen. This is a story that I always share at the start of a workshop with the people that I work with. And I end it with a few sentences, of I went to Cambodia to help and save others. But you cannot help or save others until you've helped or saved yourself. Storytellers never use microphones. This is a really strange experience. I'm sweaty. So when I returned from Cambodia with my husband, I gave up my job. Over 10 years working in education, a very successful career, but life got fuzzy. And I spent time working on myself. And I started a new journey, a healing journey. And I found myself in another exotic place. This time, Greece. The island of Crete. The smell of olives all around. And I find myself in an old building, beautiful marble floor, sun shining down through the windows, and there were a circle of faces from all around the world. And we were on a storytelling retreat. And on this day, on the marbled floor, there were white sheets of paper. You couldn't see what was written on them, but we were asked to pick up one of these pieces of paper, and on it would be a Greek god that we would be working with for our time on the island. I went around, picked the first one up, started to read it, and it was Hephaestus, the god of fire. He makes beautiful things out of ugly things. I was instantly frustrated, as I don't make things out of my hands. My husband does, and I was really frustrated and thought, for fuck's sake, why have I got this god? And it was lunchtime, so in my usual haste, I ran out to get to the table first for the beautiful Greek platter. And as I ran out of the building, I fell down 3 flights of concrete stairs. I lay on the floor, I come around and I look up, and there's these deep brown eyes looking into mine, and it was Roy, an Israeli storyteller. And some kind of shift took place. When I returned, my husband picked me up from the airport and he said, "You look different. What's happened?" And I couldn't explain to him at that stage about storytelling. And he said, "Tell me what you did." And I was like, I just told stories. And at that time, it was still a difficult time in our marriage. So I said, well, there's this 3-month retreat going on. Why don't we both go on it? Let's do it together. We had savings and a credit card. And we arrived in the beautiful Emerson College in East Sussex, a long, long way from the steelwork town of Port Talbot, where I'm from. And on that day, we're in a hut in the woods, sitting in a circle, faces from all around the world, and again, these white sheets of paper. And we were told, pick up a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper would be a story that you would work with somebody in the room. Now, we'd already discussed that we're going to go on this retreat for each other, but also for ourselves. And we didn't want to work with each other all the time. So everybody starts picking up a piece of paper. Everybody started pairing off. The two people left in the room was myself and my husband, Mike. We went to a corner, we turned the paper over, we started reading the story. And the story is called The Tiger's Whisker. I won't tell you that story now. But in short, it's a story about a young wife who's at her wit's end. Her husband has just returned from war. He's not the man he was. As we both read that story, the shiver goes up my spine, and his, and our healing journey begins. So that is how I got into storytelling. And I realised the healing aspect in it for me is the telling of the stories. And sometimes it doesn't matter if anyone's listening to the telling of the stories, but there's something that happens internally when you verbalise your own story. So when I returned to my community, Llanelli, in South West Wales, I thought, these people can't afford to go and do what I did, so I want to bring it to them. And that's what I started doing. And I want to share with you a project that People Speak Up did last autumn. And I just did a call out to the community. I welcomed women to come and share their stories. And in this particular instance, we used a Selkie myth. So silky stories, the stories of seals that come ashore and they cast aside their skins. And they have a very strong empowerment tool to the story. And in that workshop, a lady attended, and she doesn't mind me saying her name. Her name is Judith, and she's in her 70s, and she's a carer for her mother, who's in her 90s. And I met Judith 3 years ago when she attended Spoken Word Saturday, and she used to dip in and out of our sessions, wouldn't stay, wouldn't make eye contact, very nervous, hardly went out. But she came to this workshop. She walked through the door and she attended the 5-6 session workshop. And I'd like to share with you the poem that she created in response to that workshop. Hopefully the technology will work. Oh. I thought she was 90. When she started telling us her story, now she attends all our workshops. She came to a yoga visual class the other month. She now looks 70, and she's really reconnected with her community. And the thought of when I go back and I tell her that her poem was part of at the Fringe in Tranås will make her very happy if I can get this to work.
I have been a carer for many years. June 2016, and I found myself writing this poem. The poem is called I'm a Carer. I am a carer. It's not like a career. You do not apply for the job. Life gives it to you. Qualifications are not a criteria. You learn as time goes by. Time becomes very precious. Your hours are not defined, as every minute of every day becomes someone else's future as you see the years fly by. Compassion, I have plenty, but where is yours for me as I continue to live in a life that ostracizes me from you and mankind? Love and dedication drives me on to give my loved one the quality of life she deserves where she belongs. But my heart breaks seeing the change the illness has done. The world might be your oyster, Ill health governs how we exist. Joy does not come visiting or invites us out of this mist. Do you understand our predicament as we venture along alone, hand in hand?
Show our appreciation for Judith. In reflection, post-project, it was kind of a realisation of the benefit and of the health and well-being benefits of the work that we were doing. So I thought, well, hang on, this has got to have something to do with, the health boards, the NHS in the UK talks about, we need to save money and all of these things. And I thought, surely these activities that we're doing must be saving money, less visits to the doctor and so forth. So I connected with the health board and other organisations and the local council. And I'm currently working with social prescribers. And I'm not sure if you're all the different countries you're from, but social prescribers, it was kind of launched in our county in Carmarthenshire. And it's so when you go to your local doctor, rather than being given medication, you may be prescribed a social interaction activity, joining an organisation, training, or something like this. So currently we're working with the social prescribers, but it was interesting when the chair on the director of the board of our company is an academic, and we were talking about this one day, and she said, well, actually, this isn't reinventing the wheel, because back in Greek ancient time, if you were ill, you were prescribed to go to the temples and follow the tradition of hollows, holistic. So bringing in the mind, body, and the soul. You would go to temples, they had gymnasiums, they had a theatre. And in the evening, you would watch a piece of theatre, and the following morning, you would be asked to tell a story about the dreams that you had in response to that piece of theatre. And I thought, well, that's exactly what I'm doing. And many other practitioners are doing this as well. I'm not the only person doing it. But I thought that was just something that I'd like to share with you. I haven't finished as yet, but I just thought, is this a good opportunity just to open for some questions before I go on to another thread? Gives me a chance to breathe. But does anybody have a question or a question about what I've talked about so far?
When you tell stories to groups of people, do you ever feel like you have a responsibility over like how they feel? For instance, if they're like sick, do you have like feelings about I don't know. I just feel sometimes I don't want to rub people's faces in what I think or yeah.
I never say what I think. I never bring my thought or my judgment into it. It's the story that I tell. And I never get into discussions about you should do this, you should do that. The story is where it all is. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Do the participants, do they need to, what type of, they can tell any story?
Yeah.
So like if you have, I guess if you go to the doctor and get the medication for being social, I guess you have been in some trauma of some type. But it's not necessary that they take up the trauma.
No, not at all.
Just to make them verbal.
Yeah. It's so for instance, I'm working on a project at the moment with people living with dementia, and I've been working with 3 care homes, and I've had 6-hour sessions with each group. There's about 5 in each group, and I will tell a series of stories. We work through a series of connection exercises, the one we just did, touching exercises. I mean, could you just hold the hand of the person next to you? And just take it away. A simple exercise like that in a care home is touch. It's some of the people in those care homes never touch apart from when they're being cared for by a carer. So we did some of those exercises and people were crying because I've not had warmth from another person. So then from those exercises and from me telling a story or memory triggers, I have no control over what story comes out from them. And it sometimes, it's interesting, I was walking at the lake earlier and I was thinking about all the work I do with people with dementia, and it's not necessarily reminiscence, it's about celebrating that moment in time that we have together, which removes anxiety and pain for that 1 hour. They may go back to feeling really bad again afterwards, but for that 1 hour, they didn't. And I can live with that.
The tenderness in the honesty of what you do comes through in your delivery here today. That's really quite something. What really was of interest to me was when you said it's not important about anybody listening to the story. Would it be correct in thinking that as a practitioner, you gently and professionally get your patient to tell the story simply to release, to start the process of healing? Is that
yeah, definitely, but I would, they're not my patient, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And when I start these projects with organisations, I say I'm not a therapist. My techniques, I believe, are therapeutic, but I'm not a trained therapist. So that's something I always talk about. But also then because mainly the workshops that I do will just be an open call out. So it's not the case of I'm working with this particular illness or trauma. It's just like a poster or something goes out on Facebook, come and tell your story, and people come. I don't have to find the people. That's really easy to find. I forgot my train of thought now, but yes, it's through. I've not read this in a book. I've gone through it myself. But for 20 years, I've been working in theatre and education, and I've worked with young people for over 20 years, and I still work in higher education, lecturing now and then. So I have we were talking about this morning, I have a big tool bag of my training. I have done drama therapy technique training and then storytelling training. So I have this kind of bag that I pick on. But I just feel that with all the inner work that I've done helps me to hold a space that gives people an opportunity to heal. And that word heal has very different connotations. It's interesting, when I first sometimes start a workshop and we sit in a circle, there will always be at least one person, oh God, this is like fucking therapy, you know? And it has a negative connotation, and I'm amazed that when you bring people together to just talk and listen, they think that's therapy. And I think that's a real comment on where we as humans are.
Say somebody comes to you and they reveal this really traumatic story within this time slot, and they feel bad. What about afterwards? What care do you put in place then for the people who've given this story? Of course, you've got to go home and knowing you just yes, this will need them.
We have a list of therapists and organisations that we signpost people to, but it's an interesting one because in Wales the waiting list to see a therapist is pretty long. So I have to just trust myself on that. But again, I never force the people to come into my sessions. So I'm also a believer that people subconsciously maybe make that decision and they're ready to share. Some people come for the first session, they don't come back. It's very rare that person's not ready, and I'm pleased that they've made that decision. But there is an element of risk in what I do. But hopefully with my skills, that's well monitored. Can I share with you another story? Okay for time, aren't we? Yeah.
Austin 7, Ruby.
This is in one of the care homes. Somebody asked me a question about what stories come out. This is a story between there's two gents called Pete and Bob. And again, there's no confidentiality issues because they're going to be part of my photographic digital exhibition at the end of July. I told a story which kind of is about memory and about loss. And this is the story that came out after that. And when I say came out as well, when I tell a story, the silence post-story is as important as the story. It's that time where it's brewing, it's incubating, and I'm just pausing this a sec. I have to do training with the carers in the homes as well as with the people that I'm working with, because I learned through sessions that the carers sometimes, not always, really struggle when there's silence in the room. They feel they have to fill the silence all the time. But from the silence, that's when I realised that's when the magic is taking place. And I've had to trust myself on really, like sometimes it's 10 minutes, we're just sitting there, or I'll play a little bit of music, or I get my triangle out, or we just touch, or we make eye contact, and that's when the stories come out. But this is a story that came out, and these two guys, they're fab.
I can regret memories as well. Because I went to school, it was during the war, and we had a raid in Tottenham, quite a bad raid, where the land were and everything. When we went back to school, they read the names of the boys and girls that were killed, you know. And I also remember this boy, Peter Blows, and I said to myself, good. Because he was always picking on me at school. I always regretted saying that. I mean, it was a bit of a bully, you know. But it was an awful thing, and I've always regretted saying that. Good.
Now I don't know if you picked that up. Bob repeated this story every time I went back to see him, but he'd never told the story before. So this is a man in his 80s that I tell a story, and he then comes out with a story of mass regret of when he was in school and it was during the London Blitz bombings, and the next day he cheers because his classmate that's been bullying him dies. And when he told me that story for the first time, it was a proud man in his 80s, and he was crying his heart out. And for me, that's the power of the story. Thank you.
Really? We'll keep the silence, yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
As a storyteller, do you feel being in the residency with people sitting in the rooms writing for themselves, and you have a different approach to writing and
yeah, when Dominic asked me, he phoned me up, and I was like, you do realise I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet, I don't get why you're writing me out. And I've had many mornings swimming in the lake. I've created a story about that, which hopefully Rian and I will tell on Thursday night, and we've got a collaboration on that. But yeah, it kind of initially it really freaked me out, and I thought I don't know where I fit in with all these amazingly talented people with all the words that they come out with. But then now, we all have a commonality, and we've had many discussions about this, and this has come from you really, is that we all have the commonality of telling a story. It's all storytelling, but it's just a different way of documenting it, getting it out there. So I feel a lot better about it now. Thanks.
And the same on the same subject. Do you write poetry or short stories?
No.
Never did.
No.
Not.
I really did really badly in school. Actually, I think the only GCSE I had was English literature, which is quite weird now looking back. And I was kind of a troubled young person, like some of us are. And I had a real fear, and I still have a real fear of pen to paper. And I have a real fear of judgment of pen to paper. Yeah.
So that disappears if you do it.
Yeah, I don't know why, because I still use a pen and paper to craft the story. I mean, I don't initially. It's all done through pictures. So, going back to the Greek times, and you look at sort of, drama therapy, all archetypal images. It's that's how I work. But then I have to get it down on paper at some point. Yeah, it's something I'm working through. But I think actually being here has really helped that, because I'd like to share the practice of what this work is doing for people. And sometimes that needs to be in written form, I suppose.
Do you find with people's stories, is there like a theme that people stick with? Like, is it a story of grief, a story of trauma, love, rags, which is the theme you find people want to share most of all?
Pain. Yeah. Yeah.
But do you tell the story you told us? Or maybe it's not about pain, but it's about maybe not super pleasant things. Do you tell that type of stories when you introduce your activity?
Don't quite get what you mean.
The story you told before,
Yeah.
I thought wasn't super. It was positive in one way because it was.
It's painful for me to tell though.
Yeah.
Still is painful to tell.
So, but you tell that type of stories.
Yes.
And do you think that reflects why most people tell?
Yeah. Yes. And I probably wasn't clear about that. But in every group I work with, I start the session with a story. And however deep I tell that story on that day is how deep the people go in that workshop. I have to lay myself, bare. I'm part of the group. I'm not a leader. I'm a facilitator. I'm holding it so that people can go for it. Does that make sense? Does that answer? I do tell dark stories, a lot of myth stories. I tend to, so I kind of, probably till a year ago, I used to tell a storytelling set called Power of the Wild Woman. And it was inspired by the Women Who Run with Wolves, Clarissa Pencola Estes. And I find it really hard to tell those stories now because I'm not in the dark place. It's typical as a writer or a poet, when life's shit, it's really easy to write stuff. But then, life's been pretty good for the last year, so it's like I haven't really got those stories to tell, whereas the stories I'm telling now is about my work and about the people that I share my life with. I never thought I'd be spending my time going around care homes, but I just absolutely love it. I just love spending time with these older people that are locked away for a lot of their lives. And spending time with, the other project I'm working on is people with cancer. And they're part of a choir, a cancer care choir, but they never mention the word cancer. So they come to me and they tell these stories and they can't hardly speak because they've gone through this massive trauma in their life, and they have a sense of guilt that they feel they can't now talk about that story because it's gone now, it's in the past. So yes, there are a lot of dark stories.
How truthful people, like, do you believe the stories that can be presented at the time? Have you decided to make something up, you know?
So you're asking the question, do people make stuff up?
Yeah, I mean, I want it. Make myself sound like.
Yeah, you're a poet. I don't think people do. I think for spending a lot of time with young people, that sometimes people can indulge in a certain aspect of a story. I mean, you know, all our stories are different. You know, if I asked you to think of a memory and tell that story, you might then speak to a family member and they'll go, that's not how it happened. That's just how you've painted that picture. You know, it's kind of just changed in time. So I think for me, it's not about believing the stories. It's about giving them airspace, and so, not controlling the airspace, but somehow making sure that everybody gets an opportunity to share, not there's one person just talking all the time like me.
We feel that in the sessions that telling stories then becomes a conversation or a dialogue.
Yes. Yeah. So you don't know if you hear that. So the telling of the stories start to create a conversation. Yes. So one of the exercises that I do is kind of like a memory trigger. Um, when did you first find your voice? You know. And they'll go into pairs, and they'll tell that memory to the person that they're with. But then I ask that partner to tell them the memory back to them in the form of a myth, fairy tale, legend. Then that starts a discussion. Because then it's just a massive conversation about perspective. And sometimes people don't like what they hear because they could be the troll or they could be the princess. But it starts a massive conversation. And friendships are formed, really, you know, the groups that have come, it could be somebody from a really poor part of the town and from a more affluent part of the town that would not normally talk to each other in the town. And now they're best friends, going for cups of teas. You know, one punk, one lady from the WI. I'm stereotyping, but you know, it's kind of connecting people that wouldn't normally connect, and then friendships have been formed.
Like when we were around the fire, get nice, that story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now people are too scared to do that because they might get titled as a hippie, you know, or you know, oh, I'm not going to do that. Oh, stories, poetry. You know, it's we all make judgments, don't we? You know, I do as well. You know, by just making that judgment. Yeah.
Which goes back to the first point that you made about connecting.
Yeah.
Can I just say, that's absolutely wicked, and I'm so pleased that you're here. I came here 3 years ago thinking, what am I doing here? And if I hadn't come here, I wouldn't have gone on to do the kind of academic study and development practice, which is in the same field that you do. And if I hadn't done the course, I wouldn't have come on from here. And I met Judith on a train about 2 years ago, and she gave me a copy of the Care, and it was lovely.
Oh, that's going to make me cry now.
And
Yeah.
I'm so pleased that she is getting better.
Did you hear that at the back? So Mel was on a train and she met the lady, Judith, that you listened to her story. That's the power of story, isn't it?
And her voice comes back into
Yeah.
Tranås. That's great. I'm going to ask you, Eleanor, about you and your support, the support that you get, emotional support that you get in doing this work. Because there will be a lot of stuff that is bombarded at you and that will kind of stir the inner iron.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was interesting. We were having, I think, with Phelan, we were having a conversation about this. You were saying, oh, you know, how do you hold it all together, you know, everything else. And actually coming here has made me realise that I thought I was a lot stronger than I am, having serious meltdowns up at the lake. And it's given me the downtime here to realise, yes, I need more. I need to make sure that I've got that connection with somebody to talk to as well. And I've got an amazing board of directors, so I offload a lot. but I know that I need somebody professional to work with during a project. This year has been, you know, it's the first year of the company, so it's just like, but whereas it's going to calm down. And after me having, well, we had the tarot cards the other night, and I was given the death card, but it's not death, it's transformation, it's change. Then I thought, thank you, Tranås. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Tack så mycket. Yes, I'm glad it came round to